The Arizona Society Sons of the American Revolution presents The Old North Church, The Untold Story, narrated by George White, Barry M. Goldwater Chapter. This is Volume 2 of a 3-part miniseries. As mentioned in the first video, the Boston City Council of 1876 made a decision to hang the plaque on the Christ Church, believing it to be the Old North. There are many maps of Boston, however, that predate the 1876 decision and show the Christ Church is never called the Old North on any of the maps. Additionally, the maps show there is an older church in the North Square, across from what eventually becomes Paul Revere's home. That is until 1776, when the British destroyed the Old North Church. The maps all show the older church was built in 1650 and is called either the Second Church, the Old North Church, or the Old North Meeting House, depending on the map maker. Let's begin with the 1676 map by Samuel Clow, 100 years before the Revolution. This map shows the north end of Boston on the right side of the screen. The black lines show the property boundaries and the yellow hatched areas represent the buildings. The second meeting house label shows where the actual building stood. Notice lots 26 and 27 are owned by the Second Church, or the congregation, and there's a building on the site. The building would be the parsonage house for the Reverend of the Old North Church, or Second Church. If you are familiar with the North Square, you know that today this is the site of Paul Revere's house. We will talk more on this and the connection to the church towards the end of this presentation. This next map is from 1722 by Captain John Bonner. Again, the north end is at the right of the screen, and recall that in 1714 the New North Church was constructed, so it appears on this map as Church H. And the Second Church then became the Old North Church, and it appears as Church B on this map. The Christ Church has not yet been constructed. Now let's look at the 1728 map by Will Burgess. Again, the north end is on the right side of the screen. Looking at the map index, we see that Church H is still the New North, and Church B is the Old North. But now there's a new church on Salem Street that is only 5 years old. This is Church M, and it is the Christ Church. By comparison, the Old North is 78 years old. Now, moving forward 41 years. The 1769 map by William Price again shows Church H is the New North Church, Church B is the Old North Church, and Church M is the Christ Church. All three churches are still located in their original places on North Street, North Square, and Salem Street. This 1775 map of Boston is interesting. This is the beginning of the Revolutionary War, and the British have taken control of the town of Boston. Notice the first church listed on the map is the Christ Church, only now it is listed as Church A, but it is still located on Salem Street. This is the church of Reverend Mather Byles, the Tory preacher who took a position as chaplain with the Royal Regiment. The Old North is listed as a meeting house, but it is still called the Old North and remains Church B, located in the square. All the Puritan churches are listed as meeting houses, and some of the churches do not appear on the map at all. While some of the churches not listed were used as barracks or hospitals for the British troops, others were intentionally damaged with no respect shown to them. The pews were removed from the Old South Church, and dirt and gravel were hauled inside to cover the floor. It was used as an indoor stable or riding house for the horses of the British troops. The tower of the West Church was removed, and the same was done to the tower of the Old North Church. Ultimately, the Old North was set on fire and burnt to the ground. This map of Boston from 1797 by Osgood Carleton shows all the streets, public buildings, and wharfs with the names and descriptions. We can see the Christ Church and North Church are still located on Salem and North Streets, but now there is no longer a church in the square. This is consistent with other historical records. The Old North Church is gone. This interactive website called bostonplans.org, we can overlay colonial era maps onto current aerial maps of Boston with the streets and property lines already aligned. With this 1798 map of property owners, we can see Reverend John Lathrop has purchased the land where the Old North once stood in the square. We can also see Paul Revere property and the new brick church that Paul attends and Reverend Lathrop has become the minister of. Using the transparency tool to see through the map and expose the aerial underneath, we can see modern day buildings including the Paul Revere house. And fully revealed, we see the North Square of today. Another version of the 1798 map shows the building outline of Reverend John Lathrop's home on the former Old North property. Using the same website tool, if you look at the intersection of Salem and Hull Streets, we see Lot 61 is owned by the Christ Church. And using the transparency tool, we can reveal the aerial image of the Christ Church in the same location as it is today. Jumping ahead to 1874, just 2 years before the City Council has the plaque made, this three-dimensional map of Boston is made. Even this map does not call the Christ Church Old North. It is labeled on this map as Salem Street Church. 8 maps spanning almost 200 years show the Christ Church is never called the Old North Church, and the church that was called the Old North Church is no longer standing. An interesting item to note after looking at all the maps on the bostonmaps.org website, as shown on this 1883 map, the Christ Church is still called the Christ Church, even 5 years after the plaque has been hung on the church crediting it as the Old North. Again in 1900, the map shows it as Christ Church. When the commission appointed by the City Council made their decision to hang the plaque, they didn't consider all the previous city and church records, books, and maps and map makers. The documented history reveals the true names of the churches. This 1928 map of Boston again shows the listing as the Christ Church. And again, 1938 map of Boston, it is also listed as the Christ Church. This continues until 2002. The Freedom Trail and other tourist attractions related to the story have become popular, and the history of what really happened and how the plaque was hung has become lost and forgotten. Even the St. Francis Church next door has been renamed the Old North Museum. Everything in this area now is the Old North. Speaking of the Freedom Trail, did you know there's another walking trail called the Cotton Mather Trail? This walk starts in the North Square at the site of the Paul Revere house. Increase and his son Cotton Mather were both former ministers of the Old North Church. As mentioned earlier, the Mather home stood on this site and the property was owned by the Old North Church congregation. The map was provided by Annie Thwing in her book The Crooked and Narrow Streets of Boston. The map was used to create the Mather Walking Trail because it highlights many of the points of interest in the North End, including the Mather tomb and many of the houses. The book, The First American Evangelical, A Short Life of Cotton Mather by Rick Kennedy, provides the walking trail and other important sites in Boston. A quote from page 7 says, "Revere's house stands on the site of the house in which Cotton Mather was raised. This is a list of the ministers of the Old North Church before it was destroyed. None of them ever resided over the Christ Church. So to be clear, all historical events referring to these men refer to the church in the square. If Cotton Mather's name sounds familiar to you, then you're probably familiar with the Salem witch trials of 1692. Cotton Mather was the minister of the Old North Church at the time, and 3 of the judges were also friends of Cotton and attended the Old North. Several of the judges were connected to the Old North, and there's no better proof that the Christ Church is not the Old North than these men, because none of these men had ever attended the Christ Church at the time, and we know this because in 1692 the Christ Church didn't exist. Recall the dates of the churches are at the end of behind the name of the church. We see the Christ Church was built in 1723, so how could it be the Old North? One last point with the maps. Recall that a commission was created to decide if the Christ Church was really the Old North. One of the arguments presented to the commission was the original Old North did not have a tall enough tower to be seen from across the river. This engraved print was made by Paul Revere, and it appeared in the Boston Gazette on April 16, 1770. It made note of the 1768 British ships of war and armed schooners coming up the harbor and landing in Boston. Paul drew it from across the river looking at the northeast end of Boston. He clearly shows the tower of the Old North with the windows of the tower above the roof lines of the surrounding buildings. This was drawn 7 years before his famous ride. 7 years. If the tower of the Old North couldn't be seen, why would Paul draw it this way, and again rely on the tower 7 years later to send a signal? The order of events. The 1676 map shows the second meeting house in the square, and the church owns lots 26 and 27. 1722 map shows Old North Church and New North Church. The 1728 map shows the Old North Church, New North Church, and now the Christ Church on Salem Street. The 1769 map shows the same, Old North Church, New North Church, and Christ Church. The 1775 map shows the Christ Church and Old North meeting, with other Puritan churches not shown. The 1797 map shows New North Church and Christ Church, but the Old North Church is no longer there. For 53 years, the Old North Church and the Christ Church were 2 different buildings in the Boston North End. The 1798 map shows the Christ Church is not called the Old North Church, even after the plaque was hung. The 1874 map shows the Christ Church, but labeled as the Salem Street Church. The 1883 map shows the Christ Church is still not called the Old North. The 1900 map shows the Christ Church is still not called the Old North Church. The 1928 map shows the same. After all these years, it is still not called the Old North Church. And again, the 1938 map shows the same. The Christ Church is still not called the Old North Church. It isn't until 2002 the map shows that after 280 years, the Christ Church is finally labeled as the Old North Church, and the St. Francis Church next door is also renamed to be the Old North Museum. The decision to hang the plaque did not consider the historical maps of Boston that clearly show there were 2 separate churches several blocks apart, or the historical significance of the real Old North Church that was ultimately destroyed. There are many books and diaries that were written predating the decision of the Boston City Council of 1876. We touched on a few of them here, and in part 3 of this mini-series, we will take a closer look at the books. This presentation was brought to you by the Arizona Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Thank you for watching.